If you're watching this video on the day that it released, then 30 years ago today, on July 8th 1995, the Sega Saturn launched in the UK. July was of course the month of the European launch. However, in Germany, France, Spain and Holland, the console launched on July 7th. Our friends in Portugal, hey KC and Rav, how you doing? Didn't get their hands on Saturn until July 28th. Almost 2 months on from the disastrous surprise US launch at E3 on May 11th, Sega Europe released Saturn onto an equally unsuspecting public, hoping to get a head start on Sony with their pending September 29th release of the PlayStation. That said, Sega Europe, unlike their US counterparts, did try to stir up some publicity in the build up to the launch, and in doing so, broke the law. In June 1995, Sega hired some people to take a boat out onto the River Thames in London and project the Sega Saturn logo and 2 Virtua Fighter characters onto the House of Commons. This attempt at viral marketing took place at the same time as the 1995 Conservative Party leadership election. So what did Sega do? They replaced the heads of Wolf Hawkfield and Jeffrey McWild with that of candidates John Major and John Redwood. The slogan underneath stated that Sega Saturn comes out fighting. Sega though, due to the potential legal issues with the stunt, denied any responsibility, with the head of marketing for Sega Saturn in Europe, Jeremy Crisp, denying Sega's involvement entirely during an interview with Edge in January 1996. Speaking of 1996, the House of Commons stunt wouldn't be the first time Sega would flout the law during Saturn's UK life. In an attempt to create a viral ad campaign, Sega partnered with a still unknown company to place illegal fly posters around London in time for April Fool's Day, with the Saturn logo and the slogan, Sega Saturn, it's no joke. Now, no images of the poster actually exist online, but thanks to the incredible detective work of Damien McFerrin of Time Extension, an image has been found in the background of the 1997 movie called Career Girls, during a scene shot in Camden. This time though, unlike the House of Commons ad, Sega claimed full responsibility in an almost gleeful manner, with Sega Europe's marketing director Alan Mee buoyantly claiming, "This will give us instant exposure."
But wait! There's more!
There's a good chance if you're watching this, you're old enough to remember this advert. The 1994 Wonderbra advert featured Czech model Eva Herzegovina, and is considered to be one of the most iconic ads of all time. And Sega Europe, being the cheeky sods that they are, decided to tap into the hype with press ads of their own, taking influence from the Wonderbra ad. Yes, Sega used Bug, the lead character from their self-titled Sega Saturn game, with the same "Hello Boys" slogan, with Bug's eyes positioned suggestively. The UK in the 90s was notorious for risque print ads, and Sega tapped into that perfectly here. Sega also put stickers into cabs around London, promoting Sega Saturn to passengers with jibes like "sit back and endure the ride" and "you're going nowhere fast." Now, I can see why these wouldn't have gone down too well. Picture the scene: you're in a taxi, you're late for work, traffic is hell, you're getting wound up, you know your boss is going to give you shit for being late, and you look up and see the Sega Saturn rub it in that you're going nowhere fast. You'd be raging. The last thing you'd want to do is nip into Dixon's and pick up a Saturn. As a UK gamer and Sega fan, I've always loved that Sega Europe did things differently from the US and Japan, especially in regard to our marketing. And when it came to the Saturn's launch advert, again, it was totally different from the bizarre Theatre of the Eye ad that Sega of America had decided to go with. Do you want to see a race driver get strapped into a real life Hornet car, hooked up to a Sega Saturn, while a twisted bloke called Valkyrie controls the car while his eyeballs are sucked out of his skull and down 2 pipes to get closer to the screen? Roll the footage.
Hey, that's Valkyrie. Does he design the games? No, he executes them. Ready to download.
Reality always hurts.
Welcome to the real world, SEGA Saturn.
When it came to launch titles, sadly the selection was sparse. Just 4 games, one of which was the console's pack-in title, left new owners with very little to choose from. That said, there was still plenty of fun to be had. Virtua Fighter was Sega's killer app, or so it thought. While the series was popular in Japan thanks to the more engaged arcade scene, in the West the game was a relative unknown unless you were a frequent arcade goer. Given my frequent weekend visits to Booth's Enterprises in Glasgow city centre, Virtua Fighter was a game that I knew very well. I played it every weekend, but the irony is that the then 16-year-old me had absolutely no idea the Saturn was arriving in the UK. I'd seen a glimpse of the Saturn on the UK gaming show Bad Influence. They'd imported a Japanese console to show the game running, albeit briefly, as they quickly switched their focus to Ridge Racer on the PlayStation that they'd also imported. In that small clip though, I seen enough to get me excited. Nothing though could prepare me for the afternoon of July 8th, 1995. On a regular trip to my uncle's house, I was blindsided as he stopped me from entering his home entertainment room, holding something behind his back. After a crescendo of music and sound effects, there was silence, and then...
Fight! 1. Ready, go!
Virtua Fighter in the home. I was stunned. My uncle opened the door to reveal the SEGA Saturn, hooked up to a surround sound system running on a giant rear projection TV. To all you wannabe YouTube Saturn historians who played this game years or even decades later, who go on about polygon flickering and glitching, you have no idea. You can't comprehend what it felt like to see this game at that time running in your home. It felt seismic, it felt cutting edge, it felt like the future. And while Toshinden on PlayStation wooed the gaming media with its texture mapped fighters and more detailed fighting arenas, it couldn't measure up to the gameplay of Virtua Fighter. The flat shaded polygons, as timeless as they are to me and many other Sega fans, just didn't catch the eye as easily. To this day though, I love the original Virtua Fighter on Saturn, and, like it or not, the fact remains it's the best way to play the original game in the home. Model 1 emulation of the game remains inconsistent, with messed up hitboxes and collision detection. The Astro City Mini version, also emulated, suffers from input lag and significant slowdown in replays and even gameplay during later stages. The 32X port is stripped back visually, even if it does try to dupe gamers by using versions of the Saturn's character models for close-up victory poses. And it also pisses me off because the timer is in the wrong place. Richard Ledbetter reviewed all 4 Saturn launch titles in issue 20 of Sega magazine, the final issue before becoming the official Sega Saturn magazine. Virtua Fighter received 97%, with Rich saying that until Virtua Fighter 2 comes along, this game remains the greatest fighting game experience you can buy for a home game system. Saturn's launch price of $3.99 was eye-watering, and while the now legendary
$2.99
mic drop by Steve Race during Sony's E3 1995 PlayStation reveal has gone down in history, people forget that there really wasn't £100 of a price difference between both systems. Saturn came with Virtua Fighter, with new releases ranging from $39.99 to $49.99 at the time. Saturn also came with built-in storage to save your games, while the PlayStation required the purchase of a memory card. And to top it off, Saturn came with an RGB SCART cable for the absolute best picture quality. It may not have mattered to gamers in their early teens with their 14-inch Matsui TVs from Dixon's, but can you imagine the slightly older gamer buying a Sony and expecting the best, only to take their PlayStation home on day one and plug it into their top-of-the-line TV via RF? What an experience that must have been, booting up Ridge Racer only to have the Antiques Roadshow ghosting into your game. To go home with a PlayStation with the same out-the-box experience as Saturn, you had to spend an extra £40 to £50 on a game, £25 on a memory card, and £20 on a SCART cable. Like it or not, $299 worked for Sony, making the Saturn a hard sell for retailers. For fans of Virtua Fighter, having it as a pack-in game was a treat. To those who'd never heard of the game though, I can appreciate that perhaps it felt like it was forced on them, removing the choice from their day one purchase. Not that there was much else to choose from. Saturn also came bundled with a playable preview of Panzer Dragoon, which in the PAL region came in this gorgeous sleeve featuring artwork and imagery from the launch ad showing Valkyrie and the real life Daytona Hornet. On the inside cover, a message awaits new, excited Saturn owners. Congratulations on joining the world of Sega Saturn. This is just a preview of the most expensive Sega game ever developed, Panzer Dragoon. The full game with all 7 episodes will be landing in stores at the end of August. Don't miss it. And while the EU release of Panzer Dragoon was August 30th, in the UK we got the game on Friday, August 18th. Seen here, we have a print ad for the UK electronics chain Dixon's, taken from that day's Daily Mirror. The ad shows Panzer Dragoon's box art with out today and new emblazoned across it, priced at $49.99. The ad also shows the Saturn itself, along with the other 3 launch games, as well as the arcade racer, which also launched that day. The Panzer demo itself features the second stage, and in my opinion it was the perfect choice by Sega. The opening level is a slower paced introduction, while the third stage ramps up the difficulty and the story. The second stage moves the player from the desert, battling giant sandworms and swarms of insects through infested caves before culminating in a showdown with the prototype dragon, aka the Dark Dragon, although you only get to fire 2 attacks at him before the screen fades to black with the message "to be continued." The demo has several differences from the final release, which is bizarre given the game was finished and released in both Japan and the US months before. It seems that this demo is based on Panzer Dragoon U Hibaihin, an early not-for-sale Japanese demo disc. The main difference that I noticed, other than general overall polish, is that the dragon flies into the cave much quicker. In the demo, the swarm of insects in front of the cave are mixed with some of the pink feathered creatures taken out in the previous swarm. In the final build, those pink feathered creatures are removed from the swarm of insects in front of the cave. So it seems that Sega chose to present players with 2 swarms of the pink feathered creatures and then the insect swarm at the cave entrance. And I have a theory as to why Sega done this, and it wasn't just to unnecessarily stretch out the level. Panzer Dragoon was the first video game to have its soundtrack composed alongside footage of the game, allowing composer Yoshitaka Azuma to make the soundtrack appear to players like it was reacting to the action on screen. In the full game, the music is low key when navigating the cave, only to build up again as your dragon flies out the cave and into the daylight. In the demo, this crescendo doesn't happen until you're way outside the cave and fighting the 2 giant sandworms. Now, the argument would be, if Azuma was composing to footage of the game, why did it not match up to begin with? And it's a valid question. However, I've got a feeling that upon hearing the music build while fighting the 2 sandworms, a decision was made that it would be more effective to build that music while exiting the cave, therefore building anticipation for what lies ahead, rather than scoring the battle itself. In short, this section of the level was lengthened to allow Azuma's score to work its magic. The Panzer Dragoon demo was a welcome pack-in and certainly whet the appetite for a game that would go on to become one of the Saturn's most iconic franchises. The other standout launch title though was Daytona USA. the first Model 2 port on the system. Daytona on Saturn didn't give the best first impression in terms of visuals, running at a third of the arcade's frame rate with polygon clipping on the track scenery. Daytona was PAL optimised, something Sega would do for all their Saturn arcade ports, effectively speeding them up so they felt as fast as their NTSC counterparts. Unfortunately though, the display wasn't optimised, and Daytona's PAL release suffers from incredibly large borders at the top and bottom of the screen. Now, PAL gamers were used to seeing these borders, but when combined with the other issues, it didn't show Saturn in the best light next to Ridge Racer on the PlayStation. But here's the caveat: Daytona on Saturn plays amazingly, especially if you play the US or Japanese version running full screen. The handling is sublime no matter the version. Sega somehow, despite the low frame rate, managed to cram the handling of the arcade into the Saturn port. The Hornet has tangible weight, you can feel its tyres grip the road and lose that grip during power slides. The controls are responsive whether playing in manual or automatic, and despite the frame rate, despite the polygon clipping and scenery popping into view, this game feels like Daytona USA. It's undeniable. Was the port rushed? Possibly, but the argument against that claim is that the game was launched in Japan on April 1st of 1995, 5 months after the Saturn launched in Japan. Now, had the system stayed true to its original September launch date in the West, then sure, I can buy into the idea that some improvements would have been made, but would those improvements have gone as far and deep enough as to practically retool the code to improve frame rate and draw distance? I don't think so. The fact is, Daytona USA launched in arcades worldwide in 1994, March in Japan and May in the West. The SEGA Saturn, a machine with a fraction of Model 2's power that launched in Japan that same year, brought a port of Daytona USA into our homes within 12 months. And while the PlayStation had gamers all starry-eyed with Ridge Racer, the fact is that Sony's console had the easier job, replicating inferior arcade hardware, yet still making compromises in terms of frame rate. And please don't mention the Ridge Racer high-spec demo that came with Ridge Racer Type 4. It is 2 cars on track at once in order to boost the resolution and the frame rate, and also didn't arrive until 1998. Daytona on Saturn plays amazingly despite its flaws. It feels like the arcade version, it makes no cutbacks in terms of content. All of this was achieved at a time when creating 3D games on console was new. Everyone was learning on the job, there was no Sega graphics library. But you want 40 cars on track at once on 3.7 Speedway? You've got it. You want 20 cars on track at once on Dinosaur Canyon? Sure thing. You want 30 cars at track on once on Seaside Street Galaxy? No problem. And you want unique rival cars with their own texture mapped livery? Absolutely. And that AI, as ruthless as it is challenging. Rival cars will block your path at every opportunity, making you rethink your racing line into crucial bends. They'll rub you, they'll nudge you, and they'll bump you, adding to the experience and making each race unique and exciting. In his review, scoring the game 94%, Richard Ledbetter said, "The small disappointments are forgivable owing to the superlative, unparalleled gameplay. Daytona USA is the greatest road racer, in gameplay terms, that we've ever played." And Tom Guys would add to that, saying, "What really counts, the gameplay, has made its way onto Sega Saturn almost perfectly. No other racing game feels so good or has so much hidden depth to it." Words as true today as they were back then. The other 2 launch titles arrived with much less fanfare, those being Clockwork Knight and International Victory Go. A 2.5D platformer, Clockwork Knight is packed full of charm. Taking control of Sir Tongara de Peperauchu III, or Pepper for short, you navigate levels that wouldn't look out of place in Toy Story. Ironic given they both released the same year. Visually, the game was impressive at the time, with 3D backgrounds and 2D sprites based on 3D models, and the levels themselves have several standout moments as objects and scenery crash into the foreground, impacting gameplay. I'll admit, Clockwork Knight is a game that I overlooked for many years on Saturn. The arcade goer in me simply was not attracted to such a childish looking game. I was all about those arcade ports, but in years to come, I came to appreciate the brilliance of Clockwork Knight along with its sequel. Now, we love football in the UK, or the football as we call it in Scotland, and while Victory Goal won't be remembered as one of the best video games to portray the beautiful game, it was still a fun kickabout back in the day. Victory Goal features a 3D playing arena but uses 2D sprite based players, and to be fair, it was the right move because the early fully 3D football games had some severe cracks that the FIFA license could only paper over. It's a footy game that doesn't take itself seriously, has an incredibly cheesy yet catchy soundtrack, and lets you kick the utter shite out other players with slide tackles straight out of a 1990s Scottish Premier Division match. It didn't have lasting appeal as a single player game, but when played with mates, Victory Goal found its niche and was definitely worth a weekend rental at the time. 30 years on, Sega Saturn is still as amazing to me now as it was back then. It's a system that holds so many amazing memories, and while the system I was surprised with at my uncle's house on launch day wasn't mine in terms of ownership, it was bought primarily for me to use when visiting, something I did on a weekly basis back in the day. So in that regard, I've been with Saturn since day one. I got to enjoy so many of Saturn's newest games at the moment they came out. Games like Virtua Fighter Remix, a free gift from Sega for those who registered their Saturn, Panzer Dragoon, Street Fighter the movie, FIFA 96, Thunderhawk 2, Virtua Cop, Virtua Fighter 2, Sega Rally, Wipeout, Street Fighter Alpha, just some of the games I remember getting my hands on as and when they hit store shelves. To the then 16-year-old SEGAHolic, it was mind-blowing. I'll finish this video though with a little story, because you know we love those here at the SEGAGuys. When I told my mates at school that I'd been playing Saturn that weekend, none of them believed me. With the passing of time, it's easy to forget that at one time there was genuine excitement for Saturn and that Sega were still the console to own, given the Mega Drive's success in Europe and especially its UK popularity. So what did I do? The following weekend when I visited my uncle, I smuggled the instruction manual for the Saturn into my backpack and took it home with me. When I took it to school and showed my mates, they were stunned. "You jammy bastard," I remember getting called. In April 2020, during the COVID lockdown and prior to the creation of the SEGAGuys, my uncle texted me to tell me he'd found something in the loft. The Saturn. Now, my own personal console, bought for Christmas 1996, was long gone. Sold as part of the post-house purchase of 2007, along with so many systems that I'd amassed down the years. But this Saturn, it was equally special, if not more so. Our reunion was nowhere as dramatic as our first meeting almost 25 years earlier. There was no suspense, no build-up, no music and no grand unveiling. It was just me, alone in my kitchen, with the Saturn dragged from a wrinkled old Morrison's supermarket carrier bag, with no controller, no AV lead, and no games. A stark contrast indeed. Its only accessory was a power cord, neatly organised with a cable tie, ironically looking far better than the machine it was designed to power. After some moderate elbow grease and a lot of TLC, the dust and stubborn white coating was gone, and the customary black sheen of the Sega Saturn finally shone through once more. And there I was, then 41 years old, grinning like the same wide-eyed 16-year-old boy did back on that day in July 1995. My reconnection with Saturn is the rock on which the SEGAGuys is built. It was my gateway into the retro community, and the common ground which formed the bond between Dan and I. I've got so much to thank Sega Saturn for: its hardware, its games, the memories and the stories. It's a console that's given me so much, which in turn has driven the passion you see on this channel today. Happy 30th UK birthday, Sega Saturn. If you've made it to the end, thank you for watching. What are your memories of the Saturn's UK launch? Let us know in the comments below. This is James the SEGAHolic of the SEGA Guys, and until next time, we'll see you on the Sega side.